Wominjeka, welcome to the lands of the Bunurong people. First, I want to pay my respects to my elders, past, present, and emerging. I also want to pay respects to my mum's people, which is the Gunai Kurnai Gunda Jamara. I also want to pay respects to my dad's people, which is the Bunurong, Arindari, Muddy Muddy, and Yordial people. I'm a proud descendant of all them tribes. Bunurong people run from the Werribee River out around the bay to the mouth, left up to the Bass Strait to Wilson's Prom, back into the footies of the Dandenongs, and then south to the Burrarung, which is the Yarra River. Talking about eels would have been one of the main food sources through this area, as we've got this nice creek running through, and you also got the beach on the other side. So I just want to say Wominjeka, it means welcome in the words of the Bunurong people.
We know that Warren Marine, or Western Port, and its surrounds are beautiful and unique. We know that it's been a cared-for home to the Bunurong people of the southeast Kulin Nation for thousands of years. It's now a loved playground for locals and supports many tourist ventures for boating, fishing, swimming, surfing, walking, birdwatching, or just relaxing. Western Port sits within a growing population of people who live and work in its biosphere. It's been fought for by the Bunurong community since Europeans first arrived, and it's also been the site of many environmental battles. These battles continue as Western Port faces many pressures and threats. You may know that UNESCO designated Western Port as one of just over 500 biosphere reserves around the world for its outstanding natural values alongside intense interaction with humans. It's recognized as internationally significant by the International Ramsar Convention for Wetland Conservation. It hosts internationally and locally threatened flora and fauna, including 65% of Victoria's threatened bird species. We think it reached its current form more than 6,000 years ago as a large, mostly shallow bay divided by large islands, mudflats, reefs, and deep channels. These elements create a complex tidal system with strong currents that move sediments and nutrients and help plants and marine life to disperse across the waterways. The 1970s Shapiro Report was the last comprehensive study of Western Ports. The study identified 1,350 marine species, all supported by nutrient-rich mudflats, seagrass, mangroves, salt marshes, reefs, intertidal zones, and surrounding wetlands. Western Port also contains extremely rare bryozoan coral, like reef structures that nurture its marine diversity. It also provides a home for the largest colonies of little penguins, short-tailed shearwaters, and Australian fur seals in the world, and a bird sanctuary for migratory and threatened bird species. The habitats of Western Port are precious, connected, and interdependent. What we do on our land and waterways can impact the coast and its diverse communities, and what we do in the coastal communities can impact flora and fauna in surrounding landscapes. What do you know about the flora and fauna of this unique place? Come with us as we have a closer look at a few lesser-known creatures and plants of Western Port.
We're standing here at Jack's Beach, and this is a site of one of the many sites of geological significance on the Western Port area. Here we're looking at 500 million year old rocks, where they're joining with far more recent red rocks. And on them is lichens that were some of the first things to enter the land from the sea. At that point of time, the whole Gondwana land and Australia, Antarctica was all joined up into Gondwana, and the landscape was fairly barren, very little grew, and all the animals were in the sea. Where we are here was a rift, a big trough that took up most of southeastern Australia, and these rocks were laid down at that point in time. The tension between the Antarctic being pulling away from the mainland Australia caused the uplift of the Strzelecki Ranges over there, and a lot of the landscape went from being fairly flat to having more ups and downs and elevation. At this point there were conifers and ferns and dinosaurs, and that continued for some time. 60 million years ago the landscape was more tropical, and there was rainforest. The dinosaurs had become extinct, but megafauna roamed the earth. There was volcanoes, earthquakes, times of upheaval, sea level rising and dropping. And at this point, a lot of the big rivers formed, and this formed into a big delta. The volcanoes are evident by the basalt cliffs at Flinders and Phillip Island, which a lot of it's basalt, but it was a number of islands at the time that's got joined up since. And there's patches of that volcanic activity that you can see around the coastline of Western Port.
Hello everybody. These plants behind me are Phragmites australis, also known as common reed. They form vast reed beds in freshwater swamps throughout Australia, and they're home to a lot of particular birds that really like this sort of environment. One of the birds that's very closely associated with reed beds is the Australian reed warbler. You can hear one singing just in the distance there. They're a bird that spends the winter time in northern Australia, but in the springtime they migrate to southern Australia to breed in the swamps here. Another set of birds that are associated with the swamps and wetlands are the water hens, like purple swamp hens and dusky moor hens, which make their home in amongst the reed beds. But a particular group of water hens, the crakes and rails, also live in the reed beds, and these are very shy, retiring creatures usually. And when the best time to see them is in the summertime, when the water levels are dropping and muddy edges are formed at the base of the reed beds, and that's when the crakes and the rails will come out of the reed beds to feed on those muddy edges. The swamp harrier is another bird that takes full advantage of the reed beds. Swamp harriers are large birds of prey, big brown birds, and they nest on the ground. And so the protection of the reed beds is just perfect for them. They'll trample a spot in the reeds, and there they'll make their nest. And because the reed beds are so dense, they're quite safe from land predators like foxes and cats, which find it difficult to move through the reed beds. The other great thing that reed beds do is to filter out nutrients and pollutants that are flowing through the landscape from urban areas or from farmlands, and the microorganisms that live on the roots of the reeds will filter out these pollutants and nutrients, so that by the time the water reaches the bay, many of those nutrients have been filtered out, and the water getting into the bay is much cleaner.
Finding some of Victoria's most unique and sometimes cryptic residents all packed in the one place is no coincidence. Western Port's pristine pockets of reef and seagrass meadows foster a huge diversity of life in the bay. My main reason for coming here is to spot one of the meadow's most cryptic residents, the pipefish. Related to the seahorses and the iconic weedy sea dragons, you can find them stalking the meadows looking for small crustaceans to eat, vacuuming them up with a lightning flick of their elongated proboscis. Although they are accomplished predators in their own right, it is their predator avoidance strategy that's truly incredible. Their patterning and ornate appendages all contribute to a convincing disappearing act, to the point where you have to run into a pipefish to be able to see him. When threatened, the spotted pipefish will slowly and deliberately align itself with the seagrass, cunningly mimicking its movement. Woolies is the only place I'd bank on seeing one. These experts in disguise don't make it easy, so you have to be in a place where they're very prevalent to be able to have any chance. Even with the dense cover these seagrass beds provide, the abundance of prey make it an unmissable hunting ground to several large predators. Mean-looking snook, giant calamari, endemic to this area, and a plethora of rays all frequent the meadows. Following the west coast of the bay, it transitions to more of a rocky reef system. The wave action aerates the water, allowing tough kelps and the larger leaf seagrasses to grow. It's much sparser relative to the fine leaf seagrass meadows, although you still have this complex forest-like ecosystem with a kelp overstory, red and green algae, encrusting organisms plastering the rocks like a mosaic, herring, prehistoric marblefish and various wrasse flicker around the rocks. My particular favourite is our small bottom-dwelling sharks, the Port Jacksons and the swell sharks. These sharks aren't a risk to humans with small teeth for crushing prey like crabs and urchins. They can reach 1.5 metres long, but often are under a metre long when they hit maturity. Port Jacksons seek shelter during the day, wedging themselves in rocky crevices to avoid detection. They're able to breathe while remaining motionless by pumping water through their first gill and across the rest. This is quite unusual for sharks. Port Jacksons gather in great numbers to breed, piling in on top of each other, so keep a lookout in late winter to spring for that. Swell sharks are endemic to Australia, marginalised to our southeast shores. They get their name from an ability they really only deploy when they're really threatened, preferring to rely on their excellent camouflage. When all else fails, they develop water or air to make themselves larger and more intimidating, hopefully convincing would-be predators to go for a more amenable target.
Nudibranchs are really interesting. You can find them in anything from like a couple millimetres of water down to 150 metres below the surface. And we're really lucky here at San Remo in that you can find so many different species in quite a small space and across quite a few different habitats, because we do have the rocky tide pools, we have the mud flats, and we also have just the seagrass, and so that actually provides a lot of habitat for quite a few different species. As I mentioned, the sea slugs do require pretty special, unique food sources. So again, anything that puts those things at risk is likely to impact on the sea slugs. We do know that around the world and in Australia, climate change is affecting where you find sea slugs, because again, their food is being lost at certain spots because of the heat, the change in temperature, and so you see the sea slugs have to be on the move. But obviously we're in southern Australia, we don't have much further for these species to go. So we have a Dendrodoros species here, I think arborescens, but one of the fun things about nudibranchs is that it can be hard to tell. He's a dorid nudibranch, or it's a dorid nudibranch because they're all hermaphrodites. One of the things with the nudibranchs is the naked gills, which you can see here, and that's how the sea slug breathes. It is, I guess, kind of a typical dorid shape. So the dorids are the really obvious slug-shaped sea slugs. So they're kind of that oval shape. You've got your gills, you've got your rhinophores at the front, which look a little bit like antennae, and that's how the sea slug actually sniffs out food in the water. And again, because it is a gastropod, so they're related to snails, they move around on a really muscular foot. So if you love sea slugs like I do, there's a few things you can do to look after them. So sea slugs need clean, healthy water, and they need a lot of habitat to move around in. If you love Western Port, a few things you can do to get involved and protect it. You can get involved in the community-backed action to save Western Port and protect its natural spaces. If you are down in Western Port enjoying the natural environment, tread carefully. Take only photographs and memories and leave only footprints.